Okay, so the problem says you're going to create a data structure to store details about employees in a small company. You will need 4 arrays and to enter the following data: name, role, hours worked, hourly rate. And then we're going to have to enter a name and see the details of the employee along with the total they should be paid. The user should be able to enter a role and see the names of the people that work in that role. The user should be able to request the total amount to be paid out to all employees. The system should then work out the figure. So I'm going to start off by putting some buttons on my form. I'm going to put one button that is going to enter the data for the employees. I'm just going to rename that enter data. I'm going to put another button on it, and that button will be to see the details of the employees. So I'm going to write here search by name. Another button here, search by role. There we go. And one last button that will work out amount to be paid. There we go. So the first thing we want is to create our arrays. Now I'm going to make the arrays global, and the reason for that is I want all of the buttons to be able to see the arrays. So I'm going to make my first array dim names, and we're going to have 5 people in it as string. It's got to be string because it's going to store names. Dim roles for 5 people again as a string. Again, it's words, letters. Dim hours 5 as, I'm looking at it and the hours are all whole numbers, so I'm going to make it as an integer. And lastly, dim hourly underscore rate as, and that's going to have to be a double because it's got decimal places in it. There we go. So I've created the arrays as global so every button can see them. Now I'm going to let the user enter names and roles and hours worked. I'm going to do it in a loop to make my life a bit easier, and because I know how many times it's going to loop through, I'm going to use a for loop. For I equals 1 to 5. I want to enter the whatever the user types in into names, so it's going to be names. The first time through I want it in position 1, second time through in position 2, so I'm going to use I equals input box enter name. There we go. Next I. So that will run a loop that will allow the user to type in names, and we've got to do the same thing for roles, hours and hourly rate. So we're going to change that to roles, just copy and paste that again, change that to hours, one last paste and change it to hourly underscore rate. And of course we want to change the messages so the person knows what they're doing. It's going to be enter role, enter hours, enter hourly rate. Okay, so believe it or not, that is my enter button done. We're just going to test it very quickly. So I click on the button and there we go, enter name. Let's put in Frank. It's going to scroll through and it's going to enter all of the names: Bert, John, I don't know, Ginny and Melissa. And now it goes on to roll. I'm pretty sure that's going to work all the way through. We're going to have to go through it now. There we are. So I got my first button working. I can enter the data. Now what I want to do is search by name. Okay, so the next part of the program asks us to search through our table of employees and their roles by name. So the first thing I'm going to do on my button is let the user type in the name they want to search for. I've got to store that in a variable, so I'm going to write dim search underscore name. That's what I'm going to call my variable as string, and I'm going to let the user type in the name. So search underscore name equals input box, please enter name to search for. There we go. So the user has entered the name. Now we've got to search through the names table to see if we can find it. Because there are 5 names in the table, we're going to have to use a loop to go through every name. For I equals 1, 2, 5. We're using a for loop because we know how many times we've got to go through. We've got to check every position in the table. So we've got to go through 5 times. Now we've got to check to see if we found the name. If search underscore name equals the name at position 1, then. So as we're going through our loop, I will be 1, it will check the first position. I will become 2, it will check the second, third, fourth, fifth. Each time it goes through, it will check to see if the name we typed in is at the position we're looking at. If it is, we want to message box and output the name that we found at position 1. Leave a little space. Also output the role that we found at that position. Leave a space. Output the hours that we found at that position. Leave a space. And output the hourly rate that we found at that position. We don't need to leave any more space, the lifestyle of the data. Now we've got to close our structures, so we're going to write in here and if. We don't need an else because if it hasn't found it at that particular position, we don't want it to output anything. And we've also got to close our next loop, our for loop. So there we go, that button should now work. Right, we move on to the third bullet point, which says the user should be able to enter a role and see the names of the people that work in that role. It's just like searching for the name. So we're going to make a variable so the user can enter the role, dim search underscore role as string. We let the user enter the role they want to search for. Search underscore role equals input box enter role. And again we have to make a loop that will loop through. However, this time it's going to loop through all of the roles. So for I equals 1 to 5, we're going to loop through our array and check every position. If search underscore role equals roles at position I, then. So as we did before, we're going to check each position of roles and see if it matches the criteria the user typed in. If it does, we just want to message box the name at the position that we found. End if next I. That button should now be working properly also. Okay, so our last button should work out the amount to be paid to all of the employees. To work out the amount paid by all employees, we're going to have to go through the table, multiply the hours worked by the hourly rate for each employee and add it all together. And we're going to have to output a total. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an array called total. Create a variable called total. Dim total as, and we're going to declare it as a double just in case it's got decimal points in it. Now, this is actually a fairly simple one to do. What we're going to need to do is loop through our table again. So for I equals 1, 2, 2, 5. There we go. And all we have to do at each stage is multiply the hours worked by the hourly rate and add it to our running total. So that's going to mean our total is going to be what the total was already plus the hours of each individual employee multiplied by the hourly underscore rate of each individual employee. That should actually add together our total. The last thing we want to do is give that total to the user. So message box total. I'm sure you can find something better to write in there. But that bit of code will go through the whole loop, the whole table 5 times. It will find the total and add it to the hours multiplied by the hourly rate. Okay, the last thing to do then is check that all of this works. So I'm going to run my program. First thing I've got to do obviously is enter the data. So enter the name. We've got Alice, we've got Albert, we've got Robert, Harrison and Jessica. Now I'm only entering 5 names and 5 roles for everyone. So we go to Sales Manager, Senior Salesperson, spelt that wrong, that's better. We've got salesperson, another salesperson, and one last role, program. We've got hours, so 37, 50, 42, 36 and 45, and then we've got our hourly rate 20.5, 18.75, 15, 15, and the last one 24.2. So search by name, we'll put in Robert. We should see Robert is a salesperson, 42 hours worked, hourly rate of 15. Robert, salesperson, 42 hours worked, hourly rate of 15. We'll search by role, we'll put in salesperson, and we should see Robert and Harrison, Robert and Harrison. And lastly, amount to be paid, and we'll see a really big number. I'm sure if we worked it out that would be correct as well. So that is that problem solved.